Welcome to today's SIG talk for quality and testing section, where we focus on LeanFT. We're going to talk about how to combine existing Selenium with UFT and LeanFT and how to enable intelligent automation. Today is, again, brought to you through the SIG Talk channel of Vivit, and we'll be able to ask questions throughout the session, or you can tweet using hashtag VivitSigTalk. We have some future topics coming up where you can check out on our Vivit SIG Talk section of the website and see upcoming sessions. And if you're ever interested in being a speaker or to be involved in one of the sessions, please answer our survey, and these slides will be available afterwards for individuals to get that survey link. I am your moderator and host today. My name is Chris Trimper. I'm an automation architect for Independent Health. I've been doing quality assurance for over 10 years, focusing on test automation for about 8 of those. And I am currently on the Vivit Board of Directors as the Education Chair. So I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. First, we have Daniel Horn from Profi.com. He has 5 years experience in test automation, specifically working with a variety of DAX and listed companies. He enjoys a challenge to transform classical structures into faster agile delivery models, and who wouldn't? And recently, Profi has been awarded the Vivit Partner of the Year, where Jan Eriksen received the award in the Open Horizons session in Berlin. We're also joined by Jonathan Bright. He has 15 years of automation experience using the HPE, now Micro Focus toolset in a variety of global organizations. He is a co-author of 2 award-winning and best-selling books, Experience of Test Automation and Advanced UFT for Engineers Cookbook. His research includes testing as service models, digital engineering, DevOps, and lifecycle virtualization. He's been the winner of the HP Enterprise Innovation Award for World-Class Delivery in Prague and Innovation for Quality in Dublin 2014. So we're pleased to have Jonathan join us today as well. Some quick housekeeping. This is a live session. It is being recorded for all members to watch, so you can check it out later. And you can even share it with your colleagues afterwards. At the end, we're going to have some Q&A. So there's a questions pane, and you'll see that in the next slide, where you can ask your questions, and we'll get to that towards the end. I will also follow up with a short survey. And again, just as a reminder, there's the question pane, sorry, where you can answer your questions. It's on the right side. And you can tweet your questions as well, if you prefer, using hashtag VivitSigTalk. So I'd like to hand over to Daniel, where he's going to talk about combining Micro Focus LeanFT with your existing Selenium test automation. So thanks, Daniel, for joining us. We look forward to hearing your session.
Thanks, Chris, for having me today to have this really interesting topic presented to you and the audience. Just a short agenda from myself. So yeah, sure, I want to give an introduction and the motivation why to use LeanFT or Selenium in modern day developments and yeah, modern day software deliveries. Then I want to give a short conversation between LeanFT and Selenium, so you see where both tools are standing. And the main part will be to show you the utility of LeanFT that's called LeanFT for Selenium, so Micro Focus or HP at this time. Yeah, gave a little bit effort into utilizing LeanFT or utilizing your existing Selenium tests with LeanFT when you have LeanFT in-house. I will be ending with a few usage pattern how to use LeanFT for Selenium, so how to integrate this into your existing tests. I will be the speaker for this part of the talk. So my name is Daniel Horn. I'm, yeah, like Chris said, 5 years experience in test automation. Started with test automation based on mostly UFT, like I think many automation engineers were. And in the last, 2.5 years, 2.5 years, I more or less shifted into the DevOps, into the more agile methodology, and try to implement this mindset and this methodology into my customer that are normally and listed in the DAX stocks exchange. It's 30 biggest German companies. All right, so why do we want to use Selenium, or why do we want to use LeanFT? So the current market challenges are, I think you all know them. We have a huge competition in the market based on innovation and based on releases. We have faster releases. We have to come to the market faster and faster. Time in specific cases, I think Amazon was it with every 60 minutes or something like that, they release. And with this kind of challenges, you have to handle different, or you have to handle your test automation in a way different way than a few years back. The customer experience is way more direct to your development team, beginning with DevOps, beginning with the incidents will go directly into your backlog flow and so on. Also going mobile and going into more devices, you have to scale, you have to run this in the cloud or you have to run your tests in the cloud on local PCs, mobile devices on cross platforms, so on Chrome, Firefox, Safari, in Android devices, in iOS devices, and so on. So this all results in earlier testing, way more testing than we were used to in the last years, and way faster results given back to the developers itself, or to the developers themselves, so they can run into a fixed cycle and fix their code right. So how can LeanFT help? LeanFT is Micro Focus tool. Maybe you know it's part of the Micro Focus unified functional testing family. So LeanFT itself, it often comes with your UFT package, and therefore in your UFT package, or with using now UFT, you can shift from your former SIT based test to the more technical test side, so shift left, or to the more business process test side, so shift right. And LeanFT itself is based on the shift left technologies and on the technical tests. So with LeanFT, you have way faster tests than with UFT. You have way more integrated tests into your development than with UFT. You normally don't need a test automation engineer as this role, but a developer can do this. On the other side, business process testing, Micro Focus business process testing framework, where you combine UFT with ALM. So LeanFT helps you in the way more agile and way more development-driven test cases. Key features for LeanFT. So why do we use LeanFT? So instead of UFT, like I said, LeanFT is integrated in several IDEs right now in development environments. So you can use LeanFT with IntelliJ, Eclipse, Visual Studio, and so on. So as developer, you don't have to change tools. You can stay in your normal space where you work, and you don't have to change your IDEs. You don't have to ramp up or start this the UFT itself. The creation of the test cases is based on established unit frameworks and runs in known environments. So your test cases itself, they are not LeanFT test cases as you might think from, I write my test cases in UFT, but they are normally JUnit or TestNG test cases and unit test cases that then are published to your development pipeline or to your developer near result viewers. And LeanFT, like Selenium, is a tool to give you the possibility to access application and technology. So it's a tool to basically give you the okay. Sorry. It is in comparison to UFT not based on Visual Basic Script anymore. So as automation engineer, I just struggled with using Visual Basic Script or VB Script because I know the short points of this language and I know the problems with this language. But your creation of the test cases is based on modern languages like C#, like Java. So it's way more nearer to the developers themselves. You can discuss with them in the same language. They can review your test cases without getting into new syntax probabilities or syntax problems they normally will get with Visual Basic. And it supports all major technologies for your application that you want to test. So you can test with LeanFT, you can test web applications, you can test Java applications, .NET-based applications, SAP applications. And you can do this all out of your development IDE and don't have to shift or have to change any of the environments you are used to work in. Okay, so just a little bit of comparison between LeanFT and Selenium. Many things are equal here. So the programming languages, it is sure Selenium is on the market way longer than LeanFT. So there are libraries for Selenium that allow them to be put into Perl, PHP, Python, and the whole script-based languages. And in addition to, or based on that, the most development, as far as I have seen, just is done in Java or C#. So for enterprise development, I've so far have not seen any Python scripts or PHP scripts. Operating systems, they don't divide between LeanFT and Selenium. So you see, you can run LeanFT scripts on an Apple OS X or on a Linux environment that you basically can't do with UFT. UFT is an Windows-based application, and therefore you have to run this on Windows host. But with LeanFT, you can run your tests on most of the thinkable environments you can that come to your mind. The unit frameworks are also more or less the same for both tools, but where they differ is the utilities. So you see in LeanFT is, you can see it as a little brother to UFT. So there are these tools like an object identification center, like a test recorder, where you can record your tests record and replay your tests in the specific language that you wanted to have, so Java or C#. And the object identification center is when you have known UFT, you know the object spy, that's the object spy for LeanFT, object identification center. And the utility that I want to speak today about is this LeanFT for Selenium. It's just enhance your Selenium scripts with a little bit of additional salt, and you get stable, and you will get stable and, in my opinion, more clear test cases than maybe in Selenium itself. The utilities for Selenium are equally good. So you have the Selenium IDE where you can run from your Firefox your record and replay mechanisms to get fast results and to get fast regression tests. But Selenium has this thing called Selenium Grid where you can parallelize your test cases on different machines and different environments. And that's something LeanFT unfortunately doesn't have. Also, where the main difference is, and where why someone should consider to use LeanFT, or when you have UFT, you get this out of the box, is that for LeanFT, you have way more supported applications under test technologies. So you have web, you have mobile that you also have for Selenium, and you have .NET, you have SAP, Java, and mainframe applications. With Selenium tests, you just can basically just automate web integrations. As I just heard, is that also for LeanFT, since LeanFT 14.5, you have a LeanFT grid that is similar, mirroring your Selenium grid. So that's one point to add to these utilities. Okay. So what is this LeanFT for Selenium? LeanFT for Selenium extends the usage for the usage of Selenium by enhancing the functionalities and by this object identification center. So this enhancement of the functionalities is working in a way where you have way more localators to pick from to get your elements. So in Selenium, you have, I think, a handful, and the most powerful are CSS localator and XPath localators. And for Selenium, you get a few extra ones. So you can pick via visible text, you can pick via object type, or via attributes, and you can pick via regular expressions. That I think is not possible in Selenium so far. And the other point is you can combine different localators. So you don't have to just, for one element, just stick on your XPath localator, but can say, okay, this is my XPath plus this is the visible name, or this is one attribute I want this to have on the element itself. The Object Identification Center for Selenium is a little tool that allows you to spy objects in your web browser or in your started web browser. So it's a tool for identifying objects in the application directly from the IDE, or this is started from the IDE. You can select a combination of localators. I will show you a screenshot in a few seconds. And you can generate your code out of it. So you don't have to switch between Firebug to get your, between Firefox with Firebug to get your XPath or to get your CSS localators figured out. But you can do this out of your IDE and out of this utility functionality that LeanFT gives you here. The whole functionality LeanFT for Selenium is available since LeanFT 14.0. So I think it's 1.5 years or something like that. Quite new. Okay, so the Object Identification Center. This is basically the picture or screenshot of the Object Identification Center, and you can do different things here. So you can start your Selenium browser. Yeah, Selenium still runs on its own browser clients or browser drivers. So you have to start a Selenium browser out of this Object Identification Center, and you can do this by clicking this button. And then via clicking on this spy head, you can start spying on the objects. And as soon as you have an object identified and clicked on, like in UFT object spy, you get this sweet little drill down of your element and of your element XPath. So you see exactly where this element is in your XPath or in your XML structure, and you get on the right side different localators that you can pick from. So you see here CSS, XPath, index. I think this is more self-explanatory, but also some things like style localators, visible text, type, tag name, and you can select them via clicking on this bubble. When you click on the upper right, this tick on the left side, this highlights and validates if you have selected one unique element, and the button in the middle just copies your code to the clipboard, and you can copy it into your code. itself. So it's really basic, it's simple to use, and you can get your elements descriptions at least way faster, from my opinion, than with just continuously switching tools and continuously trying to figure out where my element is. This enhanced localator functionality that I talked about is you can chain elements to recreate the web structure like I did here with, you can say, okay, driver is your web driver, find element by chained, and then you can say, okay, each element in this list is one of the elements combined in another. So the first one is the top one, then in this has to be an element with tag name center, and under this has to be an element with ID, HP logo, and a name empty. And you can combine multiple localators for one of these instances, or for even just for one of your elements. So with this by each method, you just can combine different localators. Well, that is, yeah, it's easy to use, and therefore it's just clicking in this object spy and getting this kind of code. So the object spy you've seen generated this code in Java. For the header. Okay, no. So patterns for using LeanFT is you can integrate it by simply installing LeanFT on your developer devices. So just install, enable your LeanFT add-in in the IDE from on your developer device, and just import these two libraries. So com HPE LeanFT Selenium by and by each into your page object that you use for the Selenium, or into your class, and you're ready to go. And with enabling LeanFT, you make your life easier by using this utility tools, so by using this object identification center. And yeah, if you have old Selenium code, this old Selenium code will still work. So also your old page objects will still work with this part of implementation. It's not taking away any functionality that you had so far. It's enhancing them, and it's adding some new functionality to get you as developer working more efficiently and working more, target focused and focused on your automation instead of getting elements identified. And as a tip, keep your old code and just integrate your LeanFT when you maintain the old code or develop new classes. So it makes no sense to just throw away all your Selenium tests. Just enhance it or add it step by step until you maybe have all figured out, or maybe you got or your project goes live. Okay, so yeah, this is basically all I can say for now for LeanFT for Selenium. I hope this was a short introduction and a short overview how to use this and how easy it is to use and to integrate it in your current development. And therefore, I like to hand over to Jonathan, who will be telling us something about augmented intelligence and LeanFT with AI.
Thanks so much for that. That was a great introduction to LeanFT. And bringing back the story of when LeanFT was born originally, when the R&D guys were working on it in Israel, they called it Coded FT, and it was a bit too close to Coded UI at the time, which is why they changed the name. But partly why they were developing that was really for this new challenge around continuous integration, continuous delivery, and deployment, and really how quickly can you get value down the pipeline. And I think this is a really interesting challenge in the sense of the mind shift that's I'm going to try and explore today, and just kind of give you an idea of maybe some of the gaps that we still need to see, and where potentially the product's going to be going. So let me just kind of give a bit of background about myself. I've been a Vivit board member now for as the director of advocacy for the last 6 to 8 months, and I've been working with the team around really helping bring this kind of partner ecosystem and some of the challenges that you're seeing in the industry with all these different new stacks, from things like the analytics and big data to kind of the ADM space, which we're here today to talk about. And I spend a lot of time talking about this subject, and also kind of blogging on it as well, which was my entire weekend was talking a blog which hopefully will be out on the 20th around how you use automation to test machine learning and AI platforms, which as you could probably expect, using things like exertions is a lot more difficult when you're dealing with machine learning, where the data changes consistently. So test data generation and modeling suddenly become extremely important when you're talking about graph machine learning, and yeah, you have to change the mentality, which is kind of where I'm kind of going to talk about and kind of introduce at a very high level today. And then really kind of go into, maybe some more practical things of what you can do from a behavioral change perspective within your organization. And I think, as we kind of covered slightly earlier on in this session, this whole kind of concept around shift left has been a big focus, and it's been this focus of bringing it earlier into the life cycle, really looking at bringing in software developers and tests, so people who can write code and fit nicely into that development life cycle. And my kind of question or kind of concern is maybe we've slightly missed the point there, in the sense of it actually should be a lot earlier in the life cycle, all the way back to the design, so the thinking aspect. And when we start looking at using things like lean UX or lean startup methodologies, we're trying to prove a hypothesis very quickly. So being able to understand the requirements, or at least understand prove a hypothesis to an experiment very quickly. Partly what we need to do is we need to prove these systems, and those systems can be conceptual. They may not exist. They may have never even seen an agile sprint. Part of the idea with innovation labs and this failing fast and failing rapidly is you should be able to build something incredibly quickly to prove out a concept. And then on the other side of it, which I think is equally important, if not more important, is the shift right. And I kind of agree that potentially what we're looking at is this business process kind of BPT kind of view of the world, which kind of was inherited from the Mercury days, and Test Director and Quality Center bringing in kind of these jigsaw pieces of business processes, which is incredibly true. And if we look at how the industry moving towards business process automation, is that yes, it's important for businesses to be able to chain together their processes and what they're doing. So I know that's a lot of information to start, and I'm kind of just wanting to kind of tease you in the kind of the idea of what are these kind of challenges that we're going to potentially be looking at, and how does that make things different? A lot of the stuff that I've been testing, and some of the stuff that I've been doing today, actually, ranging from complex event processing on the left-hand side, you've got autonomous vehicles, car to X, vehicle to X, infrastructure to X, dealing with smart city projects. These things take a new way of being able to test things. And, I give an example around smart cities and IoT. This is where suddenly LeanFT becomes incredibly important. Selenium is great when you're talking about testing web-based browser proxy kind of headless mode. That's absolutely fine. If it runs through a browser, or, it's an API, it's a different thing. Part of it is you need to be able to understand how you deal with applications that don't have front ends anymore. And that's, the IoT landscape, where you've got to be able to interact with hugely complex ecosystems with a whole stack of data and data lakes and machine learning and information coming out from neural nets. Now, this is a very different view of the world than what potentially we're all very comfortable with in the UI space. So the question really comes back to, is it just shifting left? Is it getting earlier into the design phase, or is it more about after the deliver phase? And this is again something that Micro Focus has been phenomenal at for many years. The APM space, or the application performance management area, was really around how do we learn what actions are actually happening with our users. And once we know what actions are happening with our users, we can kind of predict their users and the behaviors of those users and adapt our systems to be able to respond to that, whether that's creating new features or functionality. But what that is feeding back into the lifecycle as a continuous learning process, not a end-to-end process, which we used to see from your V model traditional waterfall. But even now with this DevOps, it has an end, and the end is the ops side of things. My question is, where's the learning coming out of operations and coming back into that design aspect? And that really changes the way that we develop software and also how we leverage these tools, which is why I'm going to be talking a little bit about how you can use things like LeanFT within this life cycle, even though, traditionally you wouldn't think it would be able to. So, I've just seen Joe of Test Talks just interview Iran, who was a co-writer at the Digital Quality Handbook. And for those guys who are, trying to pick your favorite harness, whether that be the quantum framework, whether that be Serenity, maybe you've started using Puppeteer to do headless, starting with Docker, whatever your approach is to continuous adaptive testing, I'd definitely recommend checking out that book, the Digital Quality Handbook. There's a whole stack of people from Microsoft, Google, all talking about how they approach continuous quality or continuous testing. So if you're trying to get to that, how do you actually implement DevOps? I highly recommend that. And, I do cover in one of the chapters around how you potentially deal with testing complex systems and, this new landscape of machine learning and AI. So I'm going to kind of throw out some kind of interesting kind of concepts here, which like I said, there's a blog coming out on the 20th, which will hopefully support that. We've seen a whole stack of variations around DevOps and test ops, and I think we've kind of done that, if to anything, to death. I've seen a push from the other side, which was this kind of ops dev kind of approach, where people were looking at bringing in RPA tools, intelligent process automation, to really think about how operations has been dealing with these kind of similar automation tasks with other tools like UiPath, Jidoka, or something like VIP, Visual Integration Processor. Part of it is those tools that have been there to actually chain together operational technology have been built in a very different way to the tools that we're talking about today, like LeanFT, which came from a whole heritage of UI tools, starting off with things like XRunner and then WinRunner, moving to QTP or Astra Quick Test, and then literally onto what we're seeing today with the QTP and UFT and now LeanFT. And, hopefully we'll get into, why those tools are still incredibly important, but also how this shift towards RPA, the robotic process automation, also joins in the middle. So what I'm going to kind of throw out there, which I know a few other Micro Focus have talked about with the big data analytics pillar, which they've got, is this kind of AI operations. So, if organizations now have a 2020 strategy, DevOps might have been in their 2018 strategy, but definitely AI is in their 2020 strategy. They're going to be starting to build products with AI on them, and also systems are going to be powered by AI. And this is an interesting one because there is already tools out in the market in the APM space that use machine learning and AI, whether that to be looking at security and being able to do predictive and detect before they happen incidents. This is an understanding and obviously a good use case for AI in this space, but also it's around how you get AI solutions into operations. And actually today I've been with a client who's trying to do just that, and it's incredibly difficult because whether or not you're delivering to AWS or Mechanical Turk, or you're going to try into using Spark ML, or you're using Neo4j, or you're doing whatever stack you're trying to deploy into a AWS or into Azure using the cognitive services that Microsoft have, it's still a completely different way of delivering software, in the same way that DevOps was a massive cultural shift previously. And I think this is why it's important to reframe and rethink about what the future might look like, and how you've got to learn maybe different tools and different skills to actually be still relevant in this area. So that idea of being less reactive and being more predictive has been something we've talked about. And, you know, predictive analytics was in there for a long time. It was all around, we need lots of data. You know, one of the founding principles of building the Octane and platforms were really about how do we get more data in there about the pipeline, be able to start predicting failure before it happens, so we can catch this stuff earlier, but also understand how much extra work there is, and whether or not you're using something like SonarQube to do that at the moment, or you're starting to build this kind of knowledge into the products. And I know there's a lot of release automation tools that have started bringing in this kind of capability. But being able to understand and predict is incredibly important, in the same way as not just failing, but failing forward is also important, about how you can self-heal code, self-heal tests, self-heal platforms or infrastructure. These are all going to be new challenges which you have to deal with. So I bring in the kind of the augmented intelligence, because I don't think artificial intelligence is ready at this moment in time. So it still requires a human to be involved with this, in the very similar ways that drones started off being piloted by people and eventually got the ability to be able to fly themselves, the same as autonomous cars learned from how the patterns people were doing with driving on roads, and then you now can go and buy a Tesla X, which will drive down a road. So part of it is we've got to train these systems, which means that we also have to teach them. And so looking at testing at every single stage, whether that be configuration as code, infrastructure as code, platform as code, whether that's looking at your YAML scripts and wrapping around tests within those scripts, you know, you have to think about the pipeline, what you're releasing down, but you also have to add value at each stage. So, you know, synthetic tests in an operational sense is, you know, completely makes sense to make sure systems are working and reacting as they should be, all the way back to your comprehensive unit testing and code coverage techniques that people have been doing for decades. It's all important. And what I see a lot of is the disappearance of deployment teams and the DevOps infrastructure engineers coming in, or your release train engineers not really being able to deal with the amount of pace and technology that's potentially coming down this pipe. So the idea of being able to deliver enterprise grade AI platforms into operations is incredibly hard. And when I sat down with the CEO the other day, who's building an AI platform for an industry vertical, partly what they want to be able to do is create value, and the AI has to create value, but it also has to be based on evidence. So it has to be able to, you know, be able to do things like forensics to be able to understand why the decision was made, in the same way that we would have to test these algorithms to make sure that the hypothesis is correct. And that might be with different sample training sets, data sets. That might be with huge data or synthetically generated data, which could in theory have things like cognitive bias. So it may lean towards one particular type of usage pattern to another, or a different type of gender, or a different type of buying habit. We've got to be able to synthetically generate realistic data that actually allows us to train incredibly powerful and complex algorithms. So suddenly this is incredibly hard. And what we've missed is what's already there in the real world. So the huge amount of untapped data from all the operational side of things around digital experiences, around handoffs between different transactions, whether that be M2M, so machine to machine, or it could be one system talking to another system through a REST or whatever, or a bot to bot experience, whatever that might be. They're all transactions that you need to be able to realistically generate and test within your labs. So this is a really big challenge, is how do we start moving into this as an experiment kind of area where you can trust the evidence that's coming out of the experience the digital experience from operational sense, whether that be mobile, maybe it's Alexa using your virtual personal assistant, maybe it's your car, whatever it may be, how do you take that and model those interactions so you can visualize them and then predict what will actually happen? And this is a big challenge, and data visualization and being able to test in those environments is incredibly complex. And there is these tools that are already out there, so I'm not trying to say throw everything away. I'm kind of just setting up the understanding that you need to start playing across all of these different areas. When I sat down with the CTO of Micro Focus, partly what they're trying to do, and all the other large scale organizations are doing the exact same thing, is they're trying to build that sharing of metadata across the layer. So creating that domain or not domain specific language that understands the data between each one of these systems so that they can interact. So yes, it may still look like it's a sequential linear process, but actually all of these tools, whether they've been come through acquisition or they've been built by a team that use different technologies, like Octane, for instance, they need to be able to take metadata from their quality center product, from their ALM enterprise products, and be able to share that data to provide insight, which means it also needs to be able to connect to Storm Runner Functional, Load, and Mobile Center. Part of that is, whether or not you're using LeanFT to actually generate Storm Runner Functional and it's running it in a Docker container in the Micro Focus cloud, or you're running that local Docker in your Cube kind of setup or your local dev machine. It needs to have data which it can use, whether that's data that it's using for non-functional, so it's trying to understand the performance from a user experience perspective, or whether or not it's actually capturing any of the additional information that it needs and metrics, so that it can actually start building more realistic pictures around what the actual experience you're delivering to your customer. So there's tools like ALM Prismera, which is building on top of Octane and the other stacks to start bringing in this machine learning. So this stuff will start stepping forwards in the same way that before ALI, which was the application lifecycle intelligence, used to connect these products and sync them together like Agile Manager and QC, so that you could start getting and creating more realistic information and insight to make better decisions about what you're trying to do. So I've been using, for one of my customers at the moment, I've been using LeanFT, which is incredibly powerful. There's some really good recommendations kind of came out of the first half of the presentation. I definitely go and look at the LeanFT SDK. You can go and download that on GitHub at the moment. Obviously the link on here has got the Docker Hub, where you can pull down the LeanFT. There's one for Chrome, there's one for Firefox. You can just deploy that locally if you've got Docker for Windows or Docker Toolkit, or you're running any kind of Linux environment. You can quite easily deploy that. You can build your own and pull down the individual components. I've not tried it with .NET Core yet, but because it's got MS Build, you may see some of the functionality will run, especially under the NUnit framework that you can create as one of the templates in Visual Studio for the C#. You can do the NUnit with Selenium LeanFT template. I've been using that today, and it's incredibly flexible. You can add in additional libraries to kind of create your kind of browser proxy, so you don't just have to run with the standard ones, you can run with your own. So if you're using Puppeteer or you've decided to move away from Phantom.js, you can do all that, and you can also run that quite nicely in your your pipeline. So a lot of what I do at the moment is everything has to be delivered as a Docker container, because that's how we release into AWS and Azure. So this is kind of our definition of done, is that the test, whether that be functional or non-functional, has to be delivered into a container and able to release into the different environments and run, whether it be running smoke tests, regression tests, whatever it is. Then it needs to be able to wrap up that information, whether it's TestNG or some other kind of framework like quantum stuff, and push that out into a format that actually links all the value together. But one of the biggest problems with having headless tests is you can't see what's going on. Now, don't get me wrong, when I started doing automation in the 90s, it was the most painful thing, waiting for the screen to finish. And now you don't get to see that. Yes, you can pull screenshots, you can take screenshots on Docker images and all the kind of normal stuff which you want to do. You can do videos, etc., etc. But actually, it's quite hard to debug in a similar kind of way to what we've been just talking about. So I'm using browser proxies at the moment in a big way. So using something like Swagger or some kind of man in the middle. In this case, I'm using Kali. Enables me to intercept the messages that have been sent from the LeanFT, and then I can actually, obviously I could manipulate them if I wanted to, but in actual fact, I can also understand the request and response pairs that are coming back. I can see what information, obviously I've got all those kind of XPaths and CSS because I'm getting all the, the information, but also I can use things like the spider to go on and actually map out the entire application, so I can understand what, which screens I've actually covered, which ones I haven't, what functionality that I've not potentially explored within the in the JavaScripts. There's all sorts of other things that you can do. So using these tools, not just for security, but actually for intelligent automation is incredibly powerful. So, I definitely recommend going out and exploring those side of things. And then on the other side, the operational side of things, even if you're running in a container management tool, you can quite easily put on Prometheus or something like that and start outputting what's actually happening as far as performance. I come back from the performance and engineering side of things, so being able to get that information is really important, because I want to see how those nodes are actually getting on, and I also kind of want to understand if there's any slowdown. And of course, the downside with all of this is, you're losing the idea before of the rendering, which you would normally get using a heavier cross browser. So you still need to be able to create that, whether or not you're using Appium, whether or not you're using Storm Runner Functional, it doesn't matter, but you still need to be able to take that into account. But starting to put in transactions to start monitoring information around performance on individual, browser complete, browser ready, rendered, DOM rendered, all that kind of stuff is incredibly important. So I've kind of skipped through quite a lot of this at pace, because I want to give, us 5 minutes of clear time to talk through some of the Q&A side of things. But also I wanted to just kind of add a few extra bits around, what I've kind of experienced as kind of the plus and minuses of the LeanFT platform. I've been there since the launch. I think my name's on the launch announcement, because I was out there with the HPE guys in Vegas. And part of it, like I said, part of the end delivery was really about it being able to go through this entire pipeline with, into a container, which it's done very well, support more enterprise tools, and platforms, not just browsers, which it's done really well. I think, the guys have got it nailed in that side of things. One of the big questions that I've always kind of said, it's really important, and Firebug is great at getting XPaths, and there's other tools on the market that have great spy tools as well, but actually having something that natively supports Selenium and exploring Selenium in a W3C way is really a differentiator as far as I'm concerned, because yes, there's other tools, but we know that unfortunately the original Selenium builder, the guy unfortunately didn't continue it. They're rewriting it. It doesn't have the same exporting functionality. It's a lot more cut down, doesn't support the latest version as well. There's a lot of challenges around there. So finding a tool, a spy tool that can actually interrogate items is incredibly useful. Now it's got support to be able to actually capture a number of different DOM items at the same time. You can do the page model stuff that if you want to implement that, that's great. I'm still a little bit concerned about how they're not using a centralized object repository store. So it makes sense to have an object scanner which scans through, discovers what's the difference in change, and then deals with it in a centralized as code kind of test automation as code perspective, or test repository as code, because it needs to be able to understand, based on the branching strategy, a moment in time with the data and the builds and the components, what that DOM looks like compared to the previous version, and should be able to switch back the DOM. Equally, when people are exploring it, they should also be able to understand if other people are adding items at the same time, how they can collaborate together, because DevOps and methodologies like this are around collaboration. So I definitely want to see them be able to move towards more of a collaborative object repository store as checked in as code, and also the fact that it should be able to run natively in a browser, not as a standalone app. It is very slick, don't get me wrong, but it needs to get into that browser plugin kind of state to make it really lightweight, which I know is really difficult. The code generation from it seems really powerful. Overall, I'm impressed. Of course, you need to be able to do more test type agnostic. So it doesn't just want to be able to do UI. You want to be able to also do performance and API, and potentially start integrating with the tools like the Shunner requisitions, the service virtualization tools, the lifecycle virtualization tools. There's a lot more it needs to still do. It's still got to catch up on some of the object recognition stuff and the image recognition stuff, because there's a lot of OpenCV platforms now that are using computer vision, which you need to identify metadata that isn't just in the DOM structure. So they've got there's a lot of good things, and I think there's a lot that they need to focus on. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out and say, exciting times ahead. We've now got to prepare ourselves for the next generation of continuous testing. So with that, I'm going to pass back to Chris, and he's got a little bit more housekeeping stuff to go, and then we'll go into questions.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you, Daniel, for all your great information today. Just a reminder, I go through this last bit, that we have time to still get in some Q&A. So if you have questions, get them in the question pane while we go through this. A reminder for the 2018 Cybersecurity Summit in Washington, D.C. There's a register link found here and also on the Vivit website, where we'll have one of our board members, Chris Carpenter, and some of the Vivit staff, Terry, joining for some booth time to chat with us, to learn more about Vivit. Please even consider stopping by and signing up to volunteer to be involved in SIG Talks as well. I think that's the final slide. So let's get into some Q&A. Also forgot, sorry, upcoming webinar this week on the 13th for steps to achieve data-driven culture with analytics in ALM using TotalView. So please consider signing up for that later this week. So one question that came in regarding UFT and Selenium for Daniel or Jonathan in this case, and that is, what advantage does UFT bring on top of Selenium for web tests?
Yeah, okay. Let's say UFT itself as tool is completely different to LeanFT, or not completely different. It's another tool. Let's say it this way. And why one should consider to use LeanFT is considering web tests. It's LeanFT itself brings out of the box some point that Jonathan mentioned, with you can build an object repository. It's called application model, I think, in LeanFT, where you can really structure your application in an own class, and then just reference to this class in without using page object patterns and writing down your code itself. But you can just click at a new element, and then you have this in your class as similar as in UFT with an repository object. Other point is that it's not just web testing, it's more when you use multi-application testing. So your entry point is a web interface, and then you want to check this in your host backend or in your Java application that is that the middle office is using. You can create test cases that can do both in one script without switching tools, without switching languages, and you can implement them seemingly straightforward. I think that the main purposes or main advantages for using LeanFT, it's that it's open for more than just web.
Very cool. Very good point too. In addition to the technology support, this question came in about, does LeanFT SPI support mobile applications, specifically native mobile applications?
Okay, I think I take this one again. So I think for this Selenium for LeanFT, it does not, but the LeanFT basics it takes mobile applications. It can integrate with Mobile Center, and then when you have your Mobile Center window open, you can spy applications on your mobile devices. Also native or IO or OS elements and so on. It's also capable of doing, I think, soft buttons and some of the hard buttons. So it's more or less the same functionality that UFT brings into mobile testing. I think LeanFT has the same possibilities or the same points that they can do.
Excellent. I think this next question could apply.
Just to add to that one as well. Mobile Center is incredibly impressive. You can actually again have a container running locally and plug a USB into a device and execute. So there is some really good work they're doing to support mobile as well. And I think that's the important thing. Is it's not just web. It's not just browser based. It's an enterprise grade tool, not a kind of open source community tool.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jonathan. I really appreciate that I can do full end-to-end tests where I might have some scenario that starts with a browser, but then ends up with a desktop application, and I can carry that straight through with one framework, one cohesive set of tests. Similarly, a question comes in about, can you use LeanFT with Cucumber to create test sets? I think I know this, but I'd like to let you guys tackle that.
Yes, so you can use LeanFT with most, if not all, of the standards that are on the market right now. So Cucumber, JBehave, I think there is an integration. So you can use all your libraries that you have currently in place with LeanFT.
Yeah, I think what's important to add there is that it's, at that point, I believe, and correct me, less about LeanFT, more about the unit testing framework that you're integrating with based on your language and IDE. So JUnit, NUnit, MS, something I can't think of. So availability there is key. Another thing I'd like to throw out there is it's really nice to have the ability to expand your testing skill set without having to turn to a new vendor, without having to have 10 different tools to use to work with a variety of different technologies, but to be able to still have an enterprise tool that we can use together, but really grow the skill sets out, getting past VB script, going into a more standardized language like C# or Java, and doing some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, I definitely add to that as well, in the sense of, actually we're just one of the AI companies I'm working with at the moment. They do, one of the biggest challenges is end to end, and as you'd expect, there's various different systems in the middle. Of course, they still have a data visualization screen or a lab screen, so they've still had Selenium in there. And they had a number of different frameworks that they worked through, and each one had different problems, whether or not it was the limitations around how it can interact with Excel, or upload a file with an invalid file or whatever it may be. It's good to be able to do end-to-end testing. Sometimes you have to chain a number of different tools together, and suddenly it becomes you're at the mercy of open source. And you don't really have anywhere to reach out to apart from the community, and the communities are fantastic. It's just whether or not that's fast enough to get the response that you need to get on with what you need to achieve within, you know, a week.
For sure. A follow-up question to Cucumber, and I think this will have to be our last question for the session, is have either of you integrated a LeanFT test with Cucumber in ALM? And do you have any thoughts you can share about that?
I can talk about SpecMap, which I've used but unfortunately it's within Visual Studio Team Services and TFS, but it's very similar. You can create your executable specifications within whatever your application lifecycle management tool is, and then you can just call the actual script execution. So, you know, that's, you know, the flexibility there is, again, it is a choice around your XUnit framework that you decide to go with, and whether or not that integrates with said tool, whether that be Jira Zephyr or ALM or another product. But you can definitely do it. You can definitely run stuff from ALM. It doesn't matter what the language is, and it's the same as what you used to be able to do with the UFT scripts. So you can definitely do that.
Awesome, thank you for that. So that's the time we have for our webinar today. Thank you both, Jonathan and Daniel. It's been a really superb talks on focusing around LeanFT. Please check the survey that's going to come at the end. And again, stay tuned for more SIG talks. And if anyone attending is interested in chatting or offering topic suggestions, please reach out to us. And we'd like to know more. So thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic day.